Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. As always, in today's video, I want to show you guys how to properly use the different types of makeup brushes you have. I'm sure we all own, whether it be maybe a few or a few hundred. We all probably have a few different types of brushes. With that being said, how do I use them and what are they exactly for? So let's start with the face. So I'm going to be using actual like colored cream makeup, special effects makeup. And the reason why I'm going to be using this is because if I use regular foundation, I feel like you guys aren't going to be able to actually see it since it'll obviously blend in with my skin tone. So I say for foundation, let's go in with some pink. So when it comes to your actual foundation brushes, I feel like there's quite a few. So these are a few that I have. I'm going to go through them each one just to kind of quickly explain, and then I'll do a quick demo. So I'm sure you guys have all seen this brush. This is just your standard foundation flat brush. These three are very similar. These I like to call duo fiber brushes. This one I guess technically wouldn't be a duo because duo means two. So you can see like this one has the black shorter bristles and then the white longer ones. So these are great for if you're just trying to do very light coverage because you can see they're kind of flimsy, and also the top is a little spiky. So I'll show you guys the difference between stippling and then also buffing. These two, same thing, they're pretty much equivalent. This one's just a little bit thicker and this one's kind of, I would say, in the middle between these two. So again, this one's more flimsy, getting a little thicker, and then pretty dense. So the more dense the brush is, the fuller coverage it's going to give you. And then here is another one. It's kind of similar to, I guess, these last ones, but you can see it's really, really, really dense. And looking at the top compared to this, it's not very spiky. You can see it's very full with the bristles. Again, this one's going to give you very, very, very full coverage. Now, when it comes to the bristle type, this is going to be kind of important. So if you are using a liquid or cream foundation, which most foundations are, you typically want to stick with synthetic bristles. So synthetic bristles would be anything that's not real fur. So this is not. I have used cream with this before because of how dense it is. It works decently well, but you can see how much product is getting soaked up into the bristles, and that's because this is natural goat hair, where this one, like I said, is synthetic. So synthetic isn't going to actually like suck up the liquid, whereas natural bristles would. Natural bristles are really, really good for powder foundations, like those mineral foundations, to really go in and buff them, because again, the natural hair, because there's pores in the natural hair, it's just going to suck up all the oils of a liquid or a cream. And then last but not least, we have our trusty sponge. I will say out of every single method I'm going to show you for my face, this is my favorite. So let's start with the most basic, this guy, because I feel like almost every standard makeup brush kit comes with something like this. So again, for foundation, I'm just going to use hot pink because again, I really want you guys to be able to see the coverage, see if there's any streaking, anything like that. So going in with this brush, if this were your foundation, again, if it's liquid or cream, doesn't matter. Typically, I like to load up both sides of the brush. When I'm doing foundation on a client, I actually do use these brushes, and then I go back in with a beauty blender. The reason why I don't just like using this is because you'll see, I feel like it doesn't give you enough coverage, like evenness. So you can see buffing, I'm just trying to blend that in. And so you can see it's a little patchy. Obviously, again, this is not real foundation, but just to show you guys. And the more you touch it, you can see it's kind of getting a little streaky. But the way you can prevent that, if you do like these brushes, are as you're applying it, instead of pulling and kind of dragging the color off, what you can do is just use the very tip of the bristles. And so if I was going down, I kind of like to go the opposite way. And that kind of just helps buff and blend anything down. But again, you can just use the very tip of the bristles and kind of just buff that into your skin, especially into the hairline. This brush is really great because, you know, up here, you guys can see my scalp obviously doesn't tan because I have hair. So it's nice to kind of bring that up into there. So this one is 100% doable. Again, if you're feeling like it's getting too streaky, just lighten your pressure and just use the very tips of the bristles. So going into the duo fiber brush, there's two different methods. So I'm just going to kind of load up my brush, and you can either stipple, but again, if you're stippling, you can see there's all of that texture because this brush is really, really, really spiky. So what I like to do is wipe off the foundation and then kind of the same method, just using the tip of the bristles, lightening your pressure. If you feel like your pressure is too heavy, you can move your fingertips to the end of the brush, and that kind of helps with the mobility. And then that way you can go in and again, very, very, very lightly, just start buffing this. And it should buff out. Again, I still feel like it gets a little bit streaky compared to using like a beauty blender sponge, but that's just my opinion. But again, this is going to also give you a lot lighter of coverage. So if you don't want to have super, super full coverage, these brushes are really great. Same thing with this. I mean, it's the exact same method. Go on, because this one is a little bit more dense than this, because again, you can see flimsy, a little bit more dense. This will give you a little bit more fuller coverage, but again, I don't personally like to stipple. I like to just buff. And then, oh my God, my face. And then for the very last one, again, this one's super dense. So because this is cream, this is just gonna soak up a lot of it, but I'll show you either way. So I gotta really load it up. And this one, because it's super dense, you can't actually get away with stippling. And you can see it's going to give you a lot fuller of coverage. However, because it soaks up more product, you're probably going to end up using more product with this brush. My favorite method is just taking a beauty blender. This one's actually by Real Techniques. It's way cheaper than the real brand of beauty blenders. I've tried a bunch of dupes. Honestly, this is my favorite. So I like to just go in and just use that. And I feel like this gives me the best coverage. It also doesn't leave any like streakiness or any sponge marks or anything like that. And this is also really great for if you want to go in with your concealer. You can just buff that right in. When it comes to concealer too, I have two different brushes. And again, it's kind of the same method. I have this brush, which is pretty much equivalent to this guy. So again, if you use this, it's going to be kind of stipply. Again, you can use the tip of the bristles to slowly buff that out, but I feel like because this is so close to your eye, at least for me, like my eyes are already starting to water, so I don't really like the feeling of like the pokiness. We also have a flat concealer brush, which I'm sure you have probably seen. Again, these ones are great for if you're loading up your brush and you want that super full coverage concealer. This is a very, very good brush to use. But again, I feel like when you come towards the end, you have to really learn how to use the brush to kind of feather it. If not, that's when, again, I recommend going back in with your beauty blender. And you can either tap like this, or sometimes what I like to do is tap and roll it. And I do it pretty quickly, so it almost looks like I'm just tapping, but I do that a lot on clients. Just tap, roll, tap, roll, tap, roll. I feel like that really helps kind of buff everything out. Again, either of these brushes will work fine, depending on what kind of coverage you are wanting. Again, I always recommend this is $4, just buying one of these to at least just go over the entire thing. But you can see with going over the brush strokes with the sponge, it's a pretty smooth finish. So that's why, again, my favorite method is the sponge. So now when it comes to actually powdering your face, again, it's kind of the same concept. The thicker and more dense the brush is, the more product it's going to apply. The flimsier the brush is, the less product it's going to apply. Here are a few of my powder brushes. This one is actually my favorite. I've had this one for years. It's by e.l.f. It's just called the Complexion brush. You can see it's just kind of a dome and it's pretty dense, whereas you can see this one is a lot flimsier. So again, this one, because it's flimsier, if I take the powder, it's just really good for just setting overall the entire face if, again, you're not super oily and you just want to make sure that your foundation's going to stay on. Whereas, like I said, this one's a lot denser, so I like to load up the very end. I almost kind of like to pinch it too and like really press it, especially in the center of my face. And the reason why I like to pinch it is because I feel like it makes it even denser, so it's really, really pressing that powder in. These two are kind of the same. These are great for your under eyes. Again, this one's a little bit more dense. This one's really, really flimsy. For me personally, I don't actually set my under eyes with either of these because my under eyes crease so badly. So what you can do is just on my creases though, not like all over my face, I'll actually take a loose powder and just dump some in the lid, and then take the very tip of my beauty blender or sponge, whatever, really load it up, and then again just press this right into my concealer, right in there. So I don't technically bake, which is leaving the powder on forever. I just press it there. Then I can go back in with a brush and kind of feather down the powder and then wipe away any of the excess. And then I can go back in with my brush and kind of just stipple this. The reason why also when you're powdering your face, I recommend stippling and not smearing is because if you smear, sometimes it will actually start lifting the foundation off. And if you've ever seen where it like starts balling a little bit, that could be a reason why. So I always just suggest stippling. And then if there's a little bit of excess, again, just using the tip of your bristles, lightening the pressure, you can go ahead and just wipe off everything else. So typically once I'm done powdering my face, then I like to go in to do my contour next, and then blush, and then highlighter. So for contour, this is your typical contouring brush. This is the one I use on everybody. I use it on myself. I love it because it has the nice angle. I think it's the perfect width to get right under your cheekbones. If you don't have a brush like this, that's completely fine. Again, you can go in with a brush, like a dome brush like this, and just do a little bit of contour if you don't have a brush like that. Again, you can even go back into your powder brush. Remember earlier when I was saying you could pinch it? Merely pinch it, boom, you're good to go. So you don't necessarily need 20 million different types of brushes, but I will show you guys two different ways. So here's just a regular contour brush. Okay, this is not going to match whatsoever, but again, I just want you guys to be able to actually see what I'm doing. So I'm just dipping that in here. I always like to kind of pinch my cheeks, or not pinch, suck them in. And again, starting higher, I like to kind of stipple contour on because this is powder. If you're doing a cream contour, do it before you powder all of your foundation because you want your wets, your creams and liquids to stay wet and then powder. Because once you powder, if you put a cream on top of this, oh my gosh, it will not move. So I like to just go in there. And then the nice thing, because it is slanted, you can just kind of bring it down. I know this looks absolutely disgusting, but again, I just want you guys to see the colors. So that was just with this. I'll show you guys with a large brush. So again, I like to just pinch it, dip it in your contour. And then you could either do a very natural one by just swiping, or you can stipple to make it a little bit more fuller coverage. Of course, you can always bring it down here. If you're going to bring it down here, again, do not forget to bring it all the way back behind your ears because you don't just want an awkward gap where your jawline stops. And then going in with this one, just to show you another method. Again, I'm using this just mostly on the tip. Again, you can just very lightly bring that. And then again, on my jawline, I always like to bring it down so you don't just have a line here. So those are a few different ways you can do contour. Okay, so for blush, let's go into this neon green. Let's see if it actually shows up. Same thing, you could still use the same brush that we used for powder and contour. Just make sure you wipe it off on a tissue or your hand. I really sometimes just wipe it off on my wrist. Instead of pinching it with this brush, I actually, because it's so large, will probably just put it on half. So I'll just dip it like that. Because it's blush, I always knock off the excess, because if you accidentally add too much blush, it can be a little pain to try to get it to dissipate. And so since we only have it just on the half, I'm just going to start by just swirling and just very lightly applying that. Again, adding just a little bit more. And the reason why I like to swirl my blush on is because I don't like to stipple it in case if it is a little bit too strong. It's always easier to add more blush than to take away. Hopefully you guys can see that. So that's, again, with this universal brush. My favorite blush brush to use is this one. It's by Estee Lauder. I've had it for literally probably over 12 years. There's a divot on top. It's not supposed to be there. It's just because I've used it so often. I just love it because it's very, very loose, and I like the shape of it. Whereas like these two, even though they're round, I feel like they're just a little too dense, where I feel like it just, like I'll show you this one, because it's also smaller too. I feel like it just, oh, I know it probably looks fine now, but I feel like it gets too stuck in one area, where like this one, I feel like I can actually go in and blend it. This one's a little bit better because it is larger, but like I said, these two are very dense compared to this one, so you can see the difference between that. Hopefully this is all making sense. Like I said, the denser the brush, the more coverage you're going to have. For highlighter, I'm just going to go into this white one by Ofra Cosmetics again so you guys can see. I have a few different highlighter brushes. These are my top 3 go-tos. This has always been my number one. It's thinner on this side, a little bit wider here. It's pretty dense. The reason why I like this one is because I like a really blinding highlight, so I like to have a dense brush to really, really get that in. Where these two are pretty equivalent, they're a lot flimsier. This one's just going to give you a smaller highlighter. So first, starting with the more dense brush, I like to just dip half of it in the product, and sometimes I'll kind of tap it on, because again, depending on how bright I want it. And then I like to just use the opposite side where I didn't have any product, and then just kind of go in and blend that out so you can see it's pretty bright. Whereas this guy, again, same thing, I'm just going to put the highlighter just on half of it. Let's go on my brow bone. You can see it's just going to kind of smear it out a little bit more. It's still going to give you a bright highlight because the brush is smaller, so it's more concentrated in one area. Whereas this guy, which again is the same brush as this, just a little bit larger, same thing, we're putting it on half the brush. And you can see how it's a little bit softer. It's not as like boom, where this one's like a line, and this one's just kind of more of like the glow. So you can kind of use whichever brush you want. If you feel like this is too bright, you can always go back in. And then just for some random brushes, in case if you guys have these, like I have this giant one. The only time I ever actually use this is if my foundation is, let's just say, a little bit too dark compared to my neck. Then I'll just take a powder bronzer and literally just smear it all over, because this covers a lot. I don't really like using this on my face. I feel like, I mean, it's basically the size of my cheek. I just feel like it's too big. Same with this brush. I've had this brush again for like 12 years. It's not as large as this one. I used to use this like this one and bring my bronzer down, but it's so dense, where again this one's kind of got some squishiness to it that I feel like when you use bronzer, it's just like lines, even though it's powder, or I use powder with it. I'm not a huge fan of this. These are all the ones that I showed you. You can play around and learn what you like and what you don't like. Again, you do not need all of these brushes. I'm telling you, you do not need all of these. If I were to suggest anything, especially for beginners, I would suggest definitely the Beauty Blender for sure. If you want to try one of these, because they come in a lot of makeup kits, I would go for it, because again, you can literally just paint on the foundation and then take your sponge and just buff it out. Definitely, I would recommend a powder brush, because again, the versatility of this with being able to actually powder your face, bronze your face, contour, blush, highlight if need be. I think this is an overall really good brush. I mean, realistically, like looking down at all of this, if you needed to only have 2 brushes, these would be perfect, because even for concealer, like I said, foundation, slap this on, take your sponge, buff it out. Concealer, you could take this, pat it on underneath, go in with your sponge. If you needed to powder your creases, dip this in the powder, boom, and then the rest of your face, powder, like I said, pinch, contour, half of it, blush. You can even pinch and do the other half, little highlight. So realistically, again, you don't need 20 million brushes. I know this is a little crazy look. Hopefully this video was transparent for you guys. I'm going to list all the brushes, the names. Some of them I will say have rubbed off, but I will try my best to get everything organized down in the description box for you guys. Also, a lot of my brushes are higher end. I will say you don't need to spend a lot of money on brushes. However, I'm the type of person where I'm a firm believer in spending more money on my tools rather than the actual makeup, because I feel like my tools last a lot longer. If you have crappy brushes, you could have the best makeup out there, but it's not going to translate well. So I would rather spend a little bit more on brushes that will last longer, that I truly, truly love and am comfortable using, so that way my outcome looks great. I will also be making another series to this video on showing you guys all the different eye brushes, because if you guys thought the face brushes was overwhelming, wait till we get to the eyes. Just kidding. I will clarify everything for everybody. Thank you guys all so much for watching per usual, and until the next one, bye!